Hi, my name is Rebecca Crosby. I chose to focus on stage 7 of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, that of generativity versus stagnation. I will go over a bit about this stage. I'll then talk about my interviewee and her life story, and then I'll apply this stage and this theory to her older adulthood. Generativity is defined as having the propensity to care for the next living generation. This can take form in many ways, through parenthood, through volunteerism, through philanthropy. Maybe you join your local civic association, your neighborhood planning committee. It's just this idea that you care about what happens next to the generation below you. There are two categories some consider when evaluating generativity, that of involvement and that of inclusivity. Involvement describes the way you display your generativity through your behaviors, through the commitment of your time, through your monetary contributions. It's really just how you're showing up, how you are displaying your care for this next generation. Inclusivity has to do with who you choose to display your generativity to. Perhaps you're mainly focused on your children, your grandchildren, maybe your neighborhood, maybe it's on a larger scale, maybe you're donating money to a global organization. So again, involvement is how you're showing up, and inclusivity is who you're showing up for. Generativity can display itself at varying rates depending on a person's environment, gender, social class. It can even take into consideration the resolution of prior stages within Erikson's theory. Models of measurement for generativity do vary, and because of the variations, because of the divide in how some people look at generativity and stagnation, there are limitations, and I'll get into those later. Stagnation is often seen as a lack of psychological growth as far as not being able to see outside yourself. So maybe someone comes off as very narcissistic or self-absorbed, only being able to focus on themselves and their own pleasure. And if it's a high degree of stagnation, perhaps they're doing this at the expense of other people. So stagnation can impair further development, hence stagnation, being stagnant, and it can also display itself at the same time as generativity. So generativity and stagnation are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Some studies even show that they can exist at similar rates simultaneously. So there are some thoughts that they are modeled more on a linear scale, bipolar, but newer studies show that perhaps they can exist together. I'll switch gears now to talking about my interviewee. She is an acquaintance, a family friend, 68 years old. I grew up with her children, so I've known her almost my entire life. She was very eager to talk to me, excited, and she was very open. She led most of the conversation. As a whole, I do believe she talked about the negatives and the positives of her life at an equal rate. So it was a good conversation. It was very well-rounded, in my opinion. Important experiences to note in her older adult life, maybe 40 on, in this stage 7 of generativity versus stagnation. Her mother became severely ill. So what this meant was her mother lived alone, so she took it upon herself to start to sleep at her mother's house, leaving her husband alone in their house. This is especially important because her husband suffered from mental illness, PTSD, and agoraphobia. He served 2 tours in the Vietnam War, and he came back with some severe anxiety and other illnesses that were never treated or addressed. The idea that she left her husband to care for her mother did trigger inside of her this idea that she was abandoning her husband. So she did carry this guilt with her for a good amount of time. While she was staying with her mother, her husband suffered from a stroke. She went back to the house, and he was laying on the floor. No one was there to help him. He was there for a day and a half, maybe 2 days. So this guilt exponentially grew within her. He was treated, and while in the hospital for the stroke, they also assessed his mental health. So this was the first time in his adult life after coming back from Vietnam that his mental health issues were being assessed and then treated. During this time, her mother passed away. While it's sad, this left her some space to care for her husband again. He was being treated for his mental illness. He began to feel comfortable leaving the house. They started to enjoy their time together. She mentioned that they would take simple, fun trips to the dollar store and just these little adventures that they didn't get to do for decades as he suffered from his mental illness. She had 3 children. She watched them grow up. She supported them. She worked several jobs as she was the only working parent in the household as her husband suffered from his mental illness. She was often overworked, but she was committed to supporting her family. She was committed to supporting her children through emerging adulthood. They had families of their own. They moved away. They went to college. Her challenges during this time included the idea that she was taking care of a lot of people, her children as well as adults in her life, suffering from both physical and mental illnesses. She had difficulty having enough space, enough energy to support all of these people, and she worked a lot of jobs. It was financially tough on her, so she was tired. She does recall an accomplishment that she feels very proud of, which was brought on by the idea that she kept her family together. Her oldest son thanked her, said, "Mom, thank you so much. You did everything you can to keep us together, and I appreciate that." So she does consider this a point of pride. Seeing her kids through college, working those jobs, these are all points of pride for her. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll start the next video and we'll apply the stage 7 to her life story.